Welcome to another episode of Courageous Me. And what a thrill today. We've got Esther Althaus, who is the Managing Director of and Financial Advisor at Perspective Financial Services. Now, when I left the corporate world and started my own business, Esther was one of my very first private clients. So, that was back in 2011 or something. So it's been a while since we've worked together, but we've kind of stayed in touch over that time. She is an amazing human being, an incredible advisor, but she's here really to give us some insights into courage and the path that she's taken. So, Esther, before we get to know more about you and who you are, could you just tell us what excites you to have this conversation with me today about courage?
Hey, thanks, Kim, and thank you for having me. And it's so good to see you, especially in this forum and you recreating yourself. It's great. And you look exactly the same as you did back in 2011. And so did I. So do I.
Oh, I love you.
Okay, so what excites me to be here? Well, first of all, when you asked me to participate in this, I went and listened to a couple of your other podcasts, and I just saw and listened to the messages that came through and the consistent messages. And what really excites me to be here is the opportunity to tell my story. And if only one person can take one little thing out of it and improve something in their lives, make a decision. I'm all about decision making, really good decision making. And if someone can just make one little decision to make that life that 1% better, then for me, this is worth it. I think, we all have gifts that we have to share. We can't keep it to ourselves. And if we've had challenges, successes, opportunities, that by sharing our experiences, someone else can learn something out of it to empower and make their lives better.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And it is exactly what this is about, is that in your story, somewhere, somehow, if that is inspiration for someone else, and if everyone had that attitude, can you imagine how much better lives would be overall? It's so cool, Esther. And I'm so glad that I also get to unpack a bit of your story. Some I might know, but there's going to be a whole lot I'm sure I don't know, and I'm about to learn with the audience. So on that note,
yes.
can you tell us a little bit about who is Esther and when was one of the first times, don't care how far back you've got to go,
Yes.
that you really had to reach in and find some courage?
Okay, so that's two big questions there. Who is Esther?
Mhm.
Okay, first of all, I'm proud to say that Esther is still Esther. So even though I have children, I have a business, I'm now remarried, I'm someone's daughter and I'm someone's sister, I have worked really hard to still be Esther. So and who is Esther? Like, she's evolving. She's still a work in progress. But I feel very much like I'm somebody who is out there, who wants to keep growing, learning, creating, sharing, and just experiencing, just finding lots of random different things to experience and trying to make the time to experience those things that I put on my little to-do experience list. I won't say my bucket list, but my to-do list. In terms of when I first had to reach in, I didn't realize this till many years later when I was reflecting on how I got to where I got to different parts of my life, is that it probably was in school. Now, I would be that typical ADD student or ADHD student. If I was in school today, I'd be medicated. I would have a lot of extra therapies and support in class. And I was somebody who grew up believing that I was not good at school, that I should have been held back, that I did not have the aptitude. But there was always one thing that I was particularly good at naturally, which was maths. And where I first took real initiative, because I was also labeled as being lazy and all these little labels that probably came from being who I was back then, all the great things I was back then that was misunderstood. When I was about year 9, it was in year 9 when my ego got the better of me and I decided I didn't want to be in that lower group of maths. I want to be with the cool kids, with the smart kids. I was finally getting amazing reports, but I was being the teacher's assistant. And I just thought, nah, I need to move up. I went to the principal and I said, I want to move into the higher class of maths. And he told me, well, okay, except you're missing half the knowledge. I said, don't worry, over the school holidays, I will learn it, and I'll be ready for it. And I actually did. I taught myself um, half that maths book. You probably had a similar one, and that so all the missing chapters. Thank goodness it came naturally to me. It didn't take a long time, and I ended up being with one other person, because we were in a small school, in the higher level of maths. In year 12, there was only me and one other person in that class. So what happened? I suddenly got smart. And that was the first time I proved to myself that if I stopped listening to what other people thought of me and labeled me to be, I can prove to myself who I really am.
That's so fantastic, because you're only a year 9 girl. And I say a girl because boys are the ones who tend to typically, this is a massive stereotype, be the ones who go, yeah, I can do this, where girls tend to be the, well, I've got all these labels, I'm told that I'm lazy, or I can't do this, or misunderstood. So for you to not just want to do it, but to go to the principal and say, this is what I want to do, and follow through with it. Do you remember that feeling inside when you actually went to the principal to say this? Do you remember how you felt?
Not exactly, but I imagine that it wouldn't have been too overwhelming, because we were in a small school, a community school. The principal grew up with my father. You know, we all knew each other. It was very family, homely kind of environment. I did go to an all-girls school, so it wasn't a matter of competing or trying to be like the boys. But it's funny that you mention boys, because again, we talk about labels. I was the tomboy. Esther got on with the boys. Esther's one of the boys, because when my parents had me, their friends had already had kids. They were all boys. I was the last one to be born. I was the only girl. So my dad needed me to be, as strong as the boys and fight with the boys. And I had to prove, that I was this cool little girl who could, outsmart and outbeat the boys. So I felt, I guess that sort of came natural to me. And perhaps even if we just fast forward a lot to me being in this profession that I'm in, that is very male dominated, I never felt intimidated because being female in this environment, because I just always felt like one of the boys.
Oh, and and I know I'm jumping ahead and I'm probably jiving into something that I know about you that others don't. But if I can go there, because it's really relevant to this conversation. And like I said, as we're growing up, boys are always encouraged to take the risks and go for the thing, whereas girls are not necessarily, spurred on to do that. But we had coffee recently and we were talking about imposter syndrome and how a lot of women particularly feel like they're not good enough, or they're in a role and they'll get found out. And you were saying how you'd never felt like that. Now I've got that background about being the tomboy and almost behaving like one of the boys, although in a female body and at a girls' school. Talk to me about that. And they must be connected, right?
I really think they are connected, because even to this day, and growing up in an Orthodox Jewish community that I live in, there is a lot of segregation between the sexes. But when I put myself to where the men are, they're generally like, I'm one of the women that they're okay for me to be there. And I'm not saying that they're not okay to other women. I just think that there are a lot of women who will be like, oh, that's a boys' club, or we'll let them do their thing. And I'll be like, well, I don't really want to do their thing, but I just want to see what they're doing. So I'll just go and check them out and go, hey, and then I'm like, whatever, and move on. But the first time I was at a conference and they ran a session for women, and someone got up and spoke about imposter syndrome, it was a completely foreign concept. It was a foreign concept as a label, like the term imposter syndrome, but it was also a foreign sentiment, because sometimes they label things or put a name to something that you didn't you feel. And I'm looking around the room, I'm thinking there's a lot of women in here who feel that they're imposters, all amazing women, high achieving women. Do they really carry that, they carry that baggage, I want to say, through their careers, because they just don't think they're worthy. And I think that's a real shame.
I'm one of those women, Esther. I'm absolutely one of those women, and have spent a lot of my life and more so even in the last sort of 10 years, working through that and getting past it so that it might still be there, but it doesn't hold me back now. Whereas
Yeah.
in the past, I do believe it held me back. So it's actually quite refreshing and really intriguing to speak to someone who's not felt that and who finds that quite different to, say, the experience that you've had. So, and if we can just go back, so
Yeah,
you
sure.
were maths, right? Which is,
Yeah.
again, something that a lot of women say, oh, I was never good at maths, not my thing. It became your thing. So where did you want to take it after school? And did you follow a path? Like, did you get straight into financial services? I don't even know where that led
Oh,
from
right.
school.
Okay.
Mm.
So, no, so I was always living in this sort of parallel hybrid kind of life. There was, my community, religion, Jewish life, and then the more modern secular type of life that we were exposed to as well. However, when it came to after school, there was not a huge expectation that I was going to go to university, have a career. I was going to follow a pathway where I was going to, have a family, and that was going to be the pathway. So ultimately, that's what happened. And because I didn't really think I was good at school, the first minute I could get out of education, I was like, great, I'm happy to be out. Now, I did work, but I didn't have a profession. I did jobs, and whatever skills I'd accumulated along the way were just used for the next job. But it never occurred to me that I need to invest in a career or a profession or something more than just, doing a job with the skills that I'd had. So I got married when I was 20. I had 3 daughters. So by the time I was 26, I had 3 daughters. And I also had a realization that I'm married to somebody who is never going to provide for us in the manner, not only in the manner that I was brought up in, but just in a manner that made me feel secure that we can stand on our own 2 feet. So I thought to myself, I don't know where this marriage is going. I'm working, but this is kind of a dead end role for someone who needs to have bigger plans, and I need to start studying. So I had to then dig deep again and think to myself, wow, I was so happy to get out of education, but my only key that's going to unlock that independence for me and that confidence for me is if I educate. So when my youngest daughter was 1 month old, I took a train to the stock exchange, and I went into it was called the Securities Institute at the time. And I'd made some inquiries, and I signed up for just one unit of a subject of a course. And I thought, okay, let's just see how I go. Why I chose financial services is because, again, all the men used to talk around stocks and shares and finance, and I did like it. It did appeal to me. And so I thought, well, that appealed to me. I don't use a lot of maths these days. Really, you could use a simple calculator. But I thought there was there is a bit of a connection. So I enrolled in a course. The course was a very broad course. There was exposure to stocks, futures, foreign exchange, a variety of things. The last 2 units, a double unit in the course, was called financial planning. And as I progressed through the unit, I thought to myself, wow, hang on, I'm doing this for myself. If I can help people and make a career out of something that I'm effectively doing for myself, this is what I want to be when I grow up.
Oh,
Yeah. And so that's
yeah.
how I got introduced to financial planning. I had a sort of a loose mentor, not a formal mentor, but this guy that was much older. He was in insurance, which is a part of financial planning, life insurance, disability insurance. And he wanted to convince me always, Esther, just do insurance. You'll be good at it. You'll sales, all of that. And I just said, no, it's not enough. It's not enough. I don't want to sell people something, even though I believe in it and I do include it in my advice, but I don't want to be selling something. I want to be advising people on how to make good decisions for their life. And then it went from that, and more studies and more studies and more studies. And what do you know? I got distinctions and I got credits. And even though the kids in uni will say today, P's get degrees, um, yeah, I couldn't believe after that first unit when I did really well. And I thought, my teachers lied to me. They lied. Why did they all make me think that I couldn't do it, that I was dumb?
Why did they?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe high achieving environment, comparing to other
Mm.
girls and what they were doing. I don't know. I don't know.
It's so interesting. And can I just ask another question? You're married, right? You've
Yeah.
got 3 daughters when you decide to go down this path. And I'm the same. I did a degree at uni, but then I went into stockbroking. And did studies at the Securities Institute. Love it. But can I ask, what was the expectation and how did that play out in your relationship with your husband? When I say did he approve, it doesn't, not that he gave you permission, but how did that kind of play out from from the marriage perspective, really?
Well, effectively, I was the only one working and bringing in an income, and I was looking
Mhm.
after the kids, and I was pretty much doing everything. I didn't ask his permission. It wasn't a
No.
situation where, I needed his permission and his encouragement. It's just something that I just said I'm doing. And I don't think it would have bothered him because if I was going to be successful at it, he was going to benefit from it, right?
Yeah.
So, it didn't quite work out the way he might have thought. But in terms of prohibiting me from studying, thankfully, that was not a barrier.
No. And how did you feel? So you're getting all these really great marks and you've realized that the teachers at school lied about you.
Mm.
Yeah. So talk to me about what happened then. Where did you go?
Yeah.
So you've got these studies under your belt now, got this knowledge. What
Right.
happened?
So then I had done double the equivalent, double of what we needed to be done in that day. Now the bar's been raised, the whole industry's changed, the profession, I should say, has changed. But back at the time, I did double the minimum requirement. And then I subsequently did get divorced and my personal life settled down a little bit. And I thought, okay, now I need to find a job in this. I've done all these studies. What did I study for? And so I put myself out there. I spoke to recruiter after recruiter after recruiter, and no one would put me forward for a single job, not in administration, not in anything. I could not get a foot in the door. Why?
Why?
I'll tell you why. Because I was a divorced single mum with 3 little kids, and I had no sales experience. And I'm getting into
You're kidding.
and I'm sitting there in the interview listening to mostly men babble on about whatever they did on the weekend. And I'm just being polite. And I did not get put forward for a single interview. Then what happened? I was in the park one Sunday with my kids and I saw a guy there that I knew, grew up with actually, he's a couple of years younger than me. And I knew he worked in finance, but I didn't know what. And I said to him, I said, listen, I'm studied financial planning. Do you know anybody that I can speak to who helped me kick off? And he introduced me to somebody who worked for AMP at the time for the license of AMP, and they were recruiting advisors to be self-employed advisors. They were just finishing off and a restructure in terms of employed advisors, setting them up as individual self-employed advisors. And they were looking to bring more people in, and particularly more women. So I guess I was in the right place at the right time. And so this woman, because that's who I was introduced to, brought me in. I went through all the aptitude tests, the screening, had to go to Parramatta for 2.5 weeks with a sprained ankle. Anyway, I went and what was amazing, out of 16 people in this group, there were 4 women. And all the women passed all the modules that we had to sit and be tested on during those couple of weeks. So we did the couple of weeks, then came out of that, and suddenly we've got our license. We've got a little company, like as individuals. So now I've got a business. I've got no clients, but I'm set up and I'm good to go with a licensing framework behind me. And that's when it all kind of started.
And when you say self-employed, so for those that And those that don't get the model, so this is self-employed, so it's
Mm.
effectively your own business. So
Yeah.
you're also, not only are you working as a financial advisor now, albeit no clients, you're just
Right.
starting out. It's your own
Right.
business.
So I'm a business
How
owner,
old were you?
32, 33.
Okay. Yep.
So I'm now a business owner. So I've got to deal with all the corporate stuff, being registered as a business, VAS, all that stuff, find myself an accountant, do all of that. I've got to find some clients, provide the advice under the framework of the licensing requirements so that I, maintain a legal, an appropriate way of conducting business and figure out all sorts of processes that's going to work, figure out phone numbers and figure out this was actually also crazy. So many different companies had taken over as what's happened. It's still happened. I've managed, it was, thank goodness, the early days of the internet. I managed to find a document that had a pathway of, if you were looking for this company, well, they used to be called this, which used to be called that, which is now owned this. So if I would ultimately, I had clients with policies that I had to investigate and I knew who to call. So create a database of phone numbers, of contacts. It was in the days where calling, national calls in Australia were expensive. I had to manage my cash flow. I didn't really have any money and I did not want to go to my family for support. And so,
Mm.
little workarounds. What if I called the switchboard of head office in Melbourne and I asked to be put through? And then I end up in Sydney. I've only made a local call. So all these little workarounds. Of course, the world has changed a lot.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And doing all of this, so you're out there doing this on your own. You've also got 3 kids at home, right? That you're
Yes,
the full-time single parent of.
correct. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
And did at any point it cross your mind, like, can I do this? Like, am I really cut out to do this? Or was that just not even a thought?
No, it was not negotiable. This had to work for me.
Yeah.
This was my ticket. I had to make it work. So what I had to do though was I had to talk myself through the concept of being able to crawl before walk, walk before run, because trying to do, I'm the sort of person like I could ignore something. I could ignore something in my house for a long, long time. But then the minute I'm on it, it needs to be done now. So it was the same sort of thing. Like, it's like, I really, really want to do well at this and I've got to, this is what I need to do. And then also being with all these other men around when there were professional development days and other get togethers, you hear what they're up to and then you start to compare yourself. And that was a lesson that I had to learn. Don't compare. Don't compare because they don't live my life. I don't live their life. I don't have a wife at home making dinner and looking after the kids. So everything will happen in the right time. But the only competitor that I have to worry about is myself. Okay? That is it. And once I
And that's such a good lesson. Some people still don't know that lesson, right? And they're whatever age they are. So to have learnt that then, and in an environment where it's predominantly male,
Yep.
like, Esther, that is courage in itself, right?
Now, being in my mid 50s, I can look back and say, yes, at the time I didn't know I was being courageous. I was just,
Yeah.
I was surviving, but, I was starting to thrive a little bit, but I was really surviving. I was very proud, determined to be independent, determined to be there for my children, just sort of juggling that whole, okay, when I'm with the kids, I'm with the kids. And it's okay if I don't make another sale or if I don't pick up another client, it's fine. I'm young. I'll do it next month or next year or whatever. And look, I had a roof over my head. I do have to say and acknowledge that I did have my family did provide me with a roof over my head. So I never had to worry about that. I had nowhere to live. But, all my bills, the house maintenance, food, all of that was something that I was determined I am going to cover that myself and I'm going to make wise decisions about that because I'm the oldest in my family, so maybe there's a responsibility that comes with the oldest, but I also was scared. I had this huge fear. What if I become dependent on my parents and then I can't support my children the way my parents, or they see my parents supporting me, that I just can't do that to them. So I've got to I was consciously role modeling some independence, which now they might tell you was good or bad. But yeah, that was actually a conscious decision, because I also didn't want to take resources from my parents that my other siblings weren't necessarily getting the benefit from.
That is wisdom beyond your years, right? Because I mean, I spend a lot of time talking to women, and where they're not making decisions which they think are for themselves, it's like, well, even if it's not about you, who are the other people that you're subconsciously role modeling for, whether that's your children,
Yeah.
boys or girls, whether that's, friends, colleagues, peers, and what have you. And sometimes, particularly as a woman, when you realize that, it does make you or allow you to prioritize yourself in your own decisions, because you realize the impact what you're doing has on others. But for you to come to that realization at a younger age, and also very kind, you didn't want to take the resources that could have been for your other siblings. That's one kind sister. That in itself is a level of sort of a personal awareness and maturity that doesn't always come out at that age. So were you always like that as a little kid? Like, were you conscious of your siblings and not, wanting, I don't know, when they pour the drink and someone gets more than you? Was it a bit competitive growing up?
No, we were never competitive growing up. There was me and my sister, very close in age. Then we had two brothers. And no, my sister and I never got on till we were about 12. My parents renovated the house. We had separate bedrooms, and then we haven't fought since. And we pretty much agree on everything.
Oh, how beautiful.
Most things.
Yeah.
But no, we were not competitive. We were too different to be competitive. We just had completely different interests, and my parents didn't put us against each other. I mean, I'm not saying that they weren't silly comments and things that were probably better left unsaid, but it wasn't one thing that it was never about. It was never about comparing us to each other. If there was criticism, which there was, and I think that that's also contributed to me trying to be fiercely independent, it was more about who I am or look like or what I'm doing individually, but not relative to any of the others.
I love that. So tell me, you just said if criticism was there, that's led to you being fiercely independent. Was there one criticism or a moment where you were critiqued, maybe not by choice, that allowed you to make a decision that you don't know you would have made otherwise? Can you recall a moment where that's come into play?
Well, I can tell you that the first, I don't want to say it's a really bad decision, because a lot of amazing things have come out of it, and I have beautiful children, and I would not change anything about the past. But like I said earlier, I got to stages in my life where I reflected, why did I make those decisions? Why was my journey that way as opposed to that way? And I think that there were times where I didn't feel I deserved better. Okay. Now, a lot of that probably came down to my weight. I was always overweight, but I never cared. I never cared. I was in sport. I was in every sports day. I was in all the different sports teams. I was in dancing of our song and dance festivals and things like that. But when you're then told, and I'm not talking about my family, but just society and a little, small-mindedness of what I was surrounded with at the time, is that if you look a certain way, you will not have the same opportunities.
Oh.
I let myself believe that. And I've since learnt that that is all rubbish, and the best opportunities happened in my life when I wasn't necessarily looking my best, but when I was feeling my best, they came to me. And so, yeah.
And just on that note, that's a really good point, that you might not have been looking your best, but you were feeling your best. But so you got past maybe what society expects from people, you should look this way, you should look that way. And so how did you make yourself feel better or feel good or feel your best, even though you just said you might not have looked your best. How did you do that? Because that is beautiful.
Okay, now you want the honest stuff, right?
I want the real stuff,
You want
Esther. Don't skirt
you
around the
want
bushes
real
here with
truth,
me.
okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So look, there are a couple of ways. Firstly, it's about getting to know people. As I got to know more and more people through my work, I matured a little bit. I got to know more and more people. And then when you're single, you get to know more and more people as well. You actually start to see other people's weaknesses. I don't want to say faults, but yeah, let's call them faults. And you start to see the insecurities, I guess, of other people. And you realize, well, hang on a minute, that person looks a particular way and they're hanging on to that insecurity, or this individual is very successful in their career and the peak I'm not talking about financial services, in a whole other field, but they're conducting themselves in a way that is not consistent with someone who's got good confidence or in a good situation. So hang on a minute, it makes you recalibrate who you are. So even though I was talking before about not comparing myself to other people, I think you still do that in certain environments. When my kids were young and I didn't have much money and initially wasn't feeling great about myself and didn't want to go out and pay for a babysitter, early days of internet, I stumbled across some chat rooms, and that's where I learnt to type really, really fast, because you have multiple chats going on at once. You got to learn to type super fast. Okay. But besides that, you just end up meeting a lot of random people, and some are just innocently there because they're bored and they're looking for a little bit of company, and other people are there who shouldn't be online. Okay. And that's where, and yeah, I've never really spoken about this in too much detail, especially not publicly. But the reality is that is where I learned. Like I said, that's where I learned to type fast. And that's where I learned about people, coming across people, actually, even on a couple of occasions, people who I knew. And when I say people who I knew, are people don't realize how much information they share that makes themselves identifiable, especially for someone who's curious like me and gets on Google and goes, well, you've just told me a little bit too much and I know who you are. And it's like, why are you here?
Wow.
And then, and so the more I saw that type of behavior, the more I realized, well, there's nothing wrong with me, and there's nothing wrong with the way I look, and there's nothing wrong with it's all in your head. I can tell you one time, I've fluctuated with my weight, and one time I did lose quite a bit of weight, and someone said to me something like, gee, Esther, you look great. You look really hot. And I said, excuse me, I have always been hot. You just chose not to notice.
Oh, I love that. I've always looked hot. You just chose not to notice. Go, Esther. That's a high five moment. That. Oh, I love that.
Okay. Do I always
I need to
believe
Google
it?
that.
Well, I don't always believe it, but sometimes you
No.
need to say provocative things to people who say stupid things to you.
Oh, absolutely. And Esther, I'm gathering that when you're talking about going into these chat rooms, because if I do the maths back when you were single, that's been quite a while.
Yeah.
Even pre your current husband now.
Mhm.
Give me an estimate roughly how many years ago we're talking, because chat rooms and
yeah.
online is common now, but it wasn't then, was it?
Well, it's not so common now. Online is common, but back in the days, you would have Hotmail, Yahoo, is it ICQ, all these chat environments, and I'm talking about 20 years ago, 15 to 20 years ago. Now they shut them all down because they became such horrible environments, and there was a lot of online, bullying, and then you'd have people from other countries who would pretend to be random people, and it just got toxic. And they did shut them down, which I actually think is quite a good thing. But I had some very entertaining moments online and met a lot of interesting people from all over the world. Yeah, it did help my personal confidence, because on the few occasions where I did meet people in person, I realized, well, hang on, I can see, for example, there was this group of Jewish people from around the world, and I was in the US on a trip, and a lot of them were based in US, and we had a reunion. We just created let's have a reunion, and had a reunion with these people, and like they were very regular, average people, but the persona they were putting online was a little bit of extra bravado. Yeah, it's like, all right, I got over all that real quick.
And these are just chat rooms, literally. So it's not like video conferencing calls or anything
No,
like we do now. So you
no,
couldn't
no,
see
no.
the person. Is that right? It was
Yeah,
just the words.
yeah.
Ah,
Well, could
people
you?
can hide behind
Oh,
them.
could you see? Maybe you could. I can't even remember.
But even if you could, 20 years ago, it wouldn't be like it is today, where
No.
it's so easy. That's so fascinating that by going into these chat rooms, how much you learned about other people's insecurities,
Mm,
which actually helped you deal with your own, if you had them,
yeah.
around, what you looked like or your size at the time, that this was one of the things that gave you that level of confidence within.
Mm-hmm.
And also the acknowledgement, everyone's got insecurities, no matter what they come across as in life. They've all got them. They just don't always let you realize or notice, do they?
Because I used to think that people who were older, can I say a bad word? Can I swear?
Yes, of course you can.
Good. People who are older had their shit together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's the only word you wanted to say. Oh, God,
Yeah,
that's easy.
sorry for now. I don't know. Yeah. So I
Yep.
just thought they just had it. They just, you got to a certain age, you knew who you were, you knew where you were going, and that was that. As I get older, I realize that's not quite the case. Some people never know where they're going. Some people never get it together. But when I was younger, I thought that you did. And then
Yeah.
as I progressed and got older and realized, no, it's, so what sort of person do I want to be like? Do I want to be that lost soul when I'm 60? Or do I want to be somebody who can look back and say, what? I've had a really good life. I've had a blessed life. I want to appreciate things that the opportunities that I've had, and just, that's not the end. It's just a new beginning.
Oh, absolutely. And it's so good that you can do that and that you can look at it like this. Because I think one of the biggest things that helped me as well was, as I started to become very, very aware of who I am and what's important, I sometimes look at other people being porcupines, carrying on about stuff. And I sometimes look and go, you're just a little kid inside that grown up body.
Yeah.
And you're just behaving like the little kid.
Yeah.
Your body's,
Yeah.
a lot older than you. And that even in itself was quite refreshing. And that helped with my confidence over the years.
Yeah.
When you can look back, and that's not being condescending to them. It's just looking at their behavior. And whereas otherwise, maybe you thought in an older body, they're wiser and they've got their stuff together. But really, in actual fact, they don't always.
No.
So what other things did you do therefore? Again, if I go back to that comment you made earlier about maybe if you didn't always feel your best, you certainly have done your best and been your best. What else have you done in order to be the best version of who you are? What else has really played out for you in that way?
Well, I started to be a bit more honest with myself.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's it. I think always being honest with yourself, having integrity, conducting yourself with integrity, being passionate. I think that really, like that, whatever I was led, the messages I was told in my life that made me believe things about myself, I realized that other people don't necessarily see you that way. And especially,
Can you give me an example?
it's just like, okay, if I look a particular way, will someone not trust what I tell them? Yeah. Or if I'm dealing with someone older because I'm younger and I'm female, will they trust me? And I've actually found that if I'm dealing with people who are normal people without huge hang-ups, I prefer not to deal with people with massive self-esteem issues and hang-ups, is that they ignore all of that. They hear, like, if you're passionate about something, if you love what you're doing, if you want to share it, that is what people see and hear and want to be part of. They don't notice the things. Like, I'm looking at myself on the screen going, oh, okay, I don't want to say, because I don't want to highlight what I think about something on my face looks like. You probably don't even see it, right? And that's the thing. People don't see things. We critique ourselves about things that other people wouldn't even notice. So,
Oh, absolutely. And we all do it, like we're human beings, right?
right.
So on that note, you said, being honest with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
When have you not been honest with yourself?
Good question. But I want to talk about me being remarried, because that was a really big milestone in my life. So every decade, it seems, I do these massive things with my life. Got married at 20, divorced at 30. At 40, I took care of a health issue. At 50, well, in my 50th year is when I met my husband, Michael. Okay. And so I had said to myself for years, and apparently my friend said I've said this to them as well. I don't remember saying it to them, but I know said to myself that I don't want to meet someone. I'm happy on my own, and it's not my time, and I want my children to be settled, and my time will be when I'm 50. When I'm 50, that'll be my time. As it turns out, my children have very independent lives that have taken different pathways, and they're not even living in Australia at the moment. But what I always said I wanted for myself still happened. So when I did ultimately meet Michael, and I'll tell you how that came about in a moment, all these little voices came up in my head that said, find what's wrong with him, critique him, like everything that's wrong with him. And I had to have it was a quick conversation with myself, because I said, listen, you are criticizing and finding things about this man that are things you wouldn't want to be judged on, right? So be honest. You want to be in a relationship? Do you not want to meet someone, or do you want to meet someone? Because here is somebody who's now crossed my path, who is very different, a standout from people that I have had intermittently come across over the last 20 years. And I had to overcome this fear of, okay, do I want to be vulnerable with another person? What if things go further, and do I want to expose my life? Do I want to expose my assets? I've seen all sorts of things in financial services. So all these horror stories that you see, but that could be me if I allow myself to go down that path. And then I just said, stuff it. You know what? Like, you've got to take risks in life, and this is part of the journey. And I can tell you now, I mean, we've been married nearly 2 years, and it's has been worth it. And yeah, I'm so glad that was a very quick conversation.
But isn't that beautiful? Because that was you really being honest with yourself, noticing that this little voice going, okay, let's find fault with him. Let's find fault. That was that voice that's trying to protect you. As you said,
Right.
because it meant being vulnerable. It meant being exposed, both, personally, financially, all of that. Whereas if you find fault with him, you sabotage the happiness of what could be. You push him away, you're safe again. And I see this happen so many times and particularly with women, as they get a little bit older, saying exactly that. Because, I'll say to them, I'd love to be a professional matchmaker. I love just getting love happening out there for more people. But they say, oh, no, I'm all good by myself, and I've got my own routines now. And, it'd be cool to go to the movies with someone, but, this is mine, and I can see exactly like what probably happened to you. Why do you think you were able to shut that little voice down and silent it enough that you could embrace and endear the faults that Michael might have had? Why do you think you were able to do that? What gave you that kind of courage?
Right. So first of all, let me clarify. They're not faults that he had.
No.
You might be listening to this at some point.
Human perfections.
The faults that I was looking for, that I was fabricating to protect myself. So they weren't actual faults. They was just me trying to find some. So sorry, repeat the question. Why
do you think you were able to make that conversation, squashing those faults so quick, where others can take decades to squash them, if ever?
Yeah, because I think I really just had to be honest with myself and say, what do you want? What do you want your life to look like? You've brought up your children, your children are doing their own thing. I'm not a helicopter parent. I never was. I couldn't afford to be, right? And as people say to me now, oh, Esther, your children all live overseas. How do you feel about that? I say, I feel great about that, because they are living where they can be the best version of themselves. Would I want them to be close? Yes. Do I understand why they're not at the moment? Yes. But as I said in the beginning, I'm more than just someone's mother and daughter and whatever. I am still me. I haven't finished living my own life yet. So I just recognized that I had to be honest with myself. I have still many years left ahead of me. How do I want that to be? In an empty house by myself? Or do I want to take the next step and just allow myself to see what life could be like if I shared it with somebody? And
Oh,
it was one step at a time. We didn't get married a month after we met, and we had COVID. We had a wonderful COVID together. I'm sorry to all the people that COVID was not good for. I appreciate that it was not a good time for a lot of people. But for us, it really gave us an opportunity to get to know each other well, especially through a difficult period in the world. And yeah, we came through it.
and that is just going back to what you said about your kids too. Like, you became, as you said earlier on, very, very independent. You wanted to be independent. You wouldn't expect an independent woman to have raised 3 daughters not to become independent, right? So, so
Yes.
you've been that independent role model, and if they are now, flying around the world and living their own lives independently, it's kind of, you gave them that dose of medicine from when they were very young, which is extremely beautiful. And they've also, what a beautiful gift you've given them to show you living your own life. And I love what you said, because I'm a very, very big believer in that too, that part of my role is as a mother or a wife or as a daughter, but I'm more than that. And I do have my own life as well, and I do want to make the most of it, albeit play the multiple roles and the evolving roles as well. I feel like that is something really, really strongly coming through in you, and has been for, probably since you were a little girl. That's just gorgeous.
Thank you.
So,
And with the
yeah,
role
what?
modeling, with the role modeling part of it, also, when I realized that, I've met someone and we can be in a healthy relationship, that it's not that we're leaning on each other and I'm losing my independence. I'm still very independent. He's very independent, but we've just, we've allowed, or we've created for each other the ability to even be a better version of ourselves because we are together. And I think, as you said, for my kids to see a very independent mother, and I was independent at a very young age, it's very easy then to just go and be independent because that's what they're used to. But, not that I got married just for their benefit, but I wanted them to also see that it doesn't matter how independent you are, you can still, be that one step better. You can be better if you happen to be with the right person, and you can still be independent.
What a beautiful, beautiful lesson for 3 daughters, and for anyone listening. Like, that is just beautiful, because I do get that a lot with women, particularly that are single at this stage, saying, I wouldn't want to give up my independence. Whereas you've just said you are still independent Esther, who just happens to be in a loving, healthy relationship with someone else as well as.
Yeah. And we're very happy to do things together. We love doing things together. That doesn't make me less independent. It just means that I value something else that, he's brought, our time that we spent together, the dimension of our lives, or what I've been exposed to by being in this relationship. That he would never, ever stop me, and I wouldn't stop him from being, exactly who we are for our own aspirations. And
Oh, I love that. And to put a play on words, I know your business is called Perspective Financial Services, but I really do. I feel there's so much value in your perspective on things like, what makes an independent woman and what makes a happy relationship. Your ability to look at, say, some of the inner critic or the things that we can sabotage our own success with. Your ability to sort of look back, step back, and think about, well, I don't want that. What if I did this? That whole perspective. How did the name perspective then come up? Or is that really a silly question given the
No,
conversation we've had?
no, it's not really. Basically, I needed a company name. I'm like, what am I going to call myself? I need to register a company, right? And so I opened a Word document and I just put in into the thesaurus of the word, Shift F7. I put in words that I liked to see if there was a more professional sounding, synonym. And then what I would do is I went to the ASIC website to see, is that a registered business? Oh, it's gone already. I think I wanted objective or something. And then I just kept putting random words in. Even I might have even just started with the word like friendly, but I thought, I can't call myself friendly financial services. But what's a professional word that sounds like friendly? So it just went from that. And every time I looked it up on the ASIC website, someone else had already had a business registered, till I somehow came across the word perspective. And I'm like, okay, that resonates, because it's all about perspective. It's about, I could have two people come to me with the same, amount of money that they wanted to invest, and the advice could be very, very different because they have very different perspectives of their lives. It's not about how I think people should live their lives. I'm just creating a framework to help people live the life they want to live. And anyway, so yeah, and that's how I got the name Perspective.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And yet in this whole conversation, what I'm actually taking out of it is the perspective and the way you've looked at something and your take on it and what you've done with it. Then I think is where actually all the gold is.
Well, maybe
I
the
think
business
you're-
name, maybe the
yeah.
business name made me who I am, instead of me choosing a business name that was.
Yeah, well, isn't it true? Like, maybe, that was what was channeled down through the to you, and obviously you've embraced it and taken it on. So, Esther, on that
Yeah,
note, what's
yeah.
the next thing you've got to really reach in and find some courage for? Personal, professionally, whatever.
I think it's going to be professionally. So I we always have to make changes and evolve. Where I'm at in the business now, I've had my business for over 20 years. I still plan to have my business for quite some time. But I do need to think about a succession plan, and I don't want to say an exit plan because it sounds too soon, and I'm not exiting for a long time. I really, really love what I do, but I also appreciate that when you're in your mid 50s and with kids living around the world, the flexibility that I would like to have so that I can be available if I need to be. I need to think about what I want that to look like. So it's not just, Esther doing whatever Esther wants when she wants, and okay, I'll make more money this year or less money and whatever. I'm working on an asset, and I have to be more clear on what I want that to look like and work towards what that, last stage is going to be, even if it's 10 or 20 years from now. What does that look like? And then work my way back to get there, and just not,
Oh,
because time can pass very quickly, and another year will go past and be like, oh, what did I do this past year? Another year, right?
Oh, so easy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so many of us get to this point going, oh, fruit, how did I actually get here? It's kind of like, when they say, how do you boil a frog? Well, it just gradually boils. Like if you just stuck it in boiling water, it would jump out. But when it's gradual, you don't even realize. And then suddenly the water's boiling. So what a beautiful explanation, even about what's next for you. On that journey, what scares you?
What scares me is that I'm going to have to give up something. Okay.
Oh.
Now, I'm not a control freak, but I'm not. But when you're used to owning something and you're used to being the sole decision maker, and then you have to let something go, it's trusting my instinct. Am I going to make that right decision? Because some decisions, like, I haven't always made the right decisions, but that's okay because that hasn't impacted anybody. It hasn't impacted anything. But if I let someone else, let's say, buy into my business, that I have to let something go. And I've learned, as one of the hardest things about being on your own is that you have to make all decisions yourself. I
Mm.
often feel very sorry when I'm meeting with a couple, and you can see in the dynamic of the relationship that you have a decision maker and then a partner who it's not that they don't know as much. That's
Mm.
okay. But you have someone who has just opted out of decision making, and the loneliness of making a decision when you're in a relationship is really, I find it really sad. It puts a lot of
Mm.
emphasis on one person who can very easily be labeled as controlling. It's like, well, hang on a minute. You have every opportunity to be part of this conversation, but you are opting out of it. And now you're going to turn around and label your partner as controlling. That's I don't see that very often, thank goodness, but I
Mm.
have seen it from time to time. So I got used to being the sole decision maker. Okay.
Mm.
That was my
Mm.
reality. I got used to that.
Mm. Mm.
Okay. Now I have to relearn what it means to make decisions with someone else and be
Ah,
okay with that.
yeah.
Okay. So in my
Yeah.
personal life, we do that
Yeah.
and I'm okay with it. So
But you had to relearn to do
I
that.
had to relearn to
Yeah.
do that. And
Mm.
now in a business, I'm going to have to do that in a business context if I want to really, set up something that is really valuable or valued the most that it
Mm.
can be for at a time when I can't be
Mm.
doing this anymore.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Oh, Esther, I love it. Oh, I love it. I could seriously chat to you all day and go, oh my God, there's so many little rabbit warrens we could have gone down. If someone does want to know a bit more about either the advice that you give as a financial advisor, obviously I'll put all the details in the show notes. Where
Yeah.
would you direct them to go, first of all? Would it be to your website?
No, I'd actually say to go to LinkedIn.
Oh, okay.
Go to
Yes.
my LinkedIn profile because I'm a little bit active on that.
Yep.
I have done. There are a few things on Google and YouTube that are already there. So if you type my name in, there's only one other person in the whole world who lives in Germany who has the same name as me.
And we'll put the details
Don't
in the
know
show
her,
notes.
and we're not related. And she does a completely different field of.
Oh,
I can't remember what it is, but it's nothing near financial services. But yeah, and but you can contact me from my website. And yeah, I'd be happy to speak to anyone who wants to have a chat. If they come via Courageous Me, I'm happy to give an initial meeting at no cost. I normally do charge a cost for that, but I'm happy.
mm.
They can just say Courageous Me, and I won't charge for an initial meeting, and then just take it from there.
Oh, that is so generous. Thank you so much. And go and speak to Esther to get a perspective on your financial services, and just find out. I think that's the thing, isn't it? Too, is just having that conversation to start with, so you at least know the lay of the land and what's going on, and from there making a decision around what next. So,
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And sometimes people
mm,
feel more comfortable doing that in a group environment, or providing
mm,
or having me facilitate the discussion around relationship with money, financial services, how to get involved if you're in a relationship, how to get involved if you've never been involved, and those are things that I love workshopping and doing in
mm.
sort of a group environment. So I'm pretty flexible. I just want
Oh, I
more
love
people
that.
to make smarter
Yeah.
decisions and live happily ever after.
Oh, I love that. So everyone's happy ever after. Stay courageous, me. Go and speak to
Yes.
Esther. All is sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Esther, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Love our conversation. And I look forward to seeing what goes on in the next chapters of your life.
Thank you,
Thank
Kim.
you.
Thanks. Be well.